Hi, I'm Jenna.
And I'm Erin.
And welcome to Between Two Filing Cabinets, where we bring you tips, trends, troubles, and stories from HR. And Erin, last time we talked about politics in the workplace. It was election week, so we had a good conversation about that. And kind of looking ahead, we're getting into holiday season. So I thought it would be important for us to kind of talk about maybe some of the issues that come up during the holidays and looking at the current landscape and some of the things that are going on concerning sexual harassment in the workplace. I think it's pretty important that employers address these issues. And definitely I think this time of year I tend to get some calls from companies about it's usually after the holiday party that I get the call where something has happened, where I kind of wish that maybe that they had called me beforehand to talk about how to handle things to make sure that issues don't arise.
Right.
But yeah, I think there's a lot of things going on in this, so I thought it'd be important for us to talk about it and give you guys some tips on how you should be proceeding and addressing these things.
Yeah, I'm curious, Jenna, if you have been hearing more or you anticipate hearing more from people about these kind of topics. Given the landscape right now, you mentioned kind of the Me Too campaign, people who are speaking up more. Now, I know Me Too is more about assault than harassment, but I think it signals a shift in talking more about things that were being left unsaid or unreported, and kind of a more willingness to speak out in those kind of contexts. So have you seen or do you anticipate kind of an uptick in reporting?
Yeah, so I've received a few more calls from companies that have had employees that have brought concerns or just questions how to handle situations. So I've definitely seen a little bit more activity in this area, and I think we're probably going to continue to see that as people do feel more empowered. And as you talked about with the Me Too campaign, it really has brought a lot of attention to these issues, outside of the workplace, but inside the workplace as well, because it really has broadened that scope to include things like harassment of all sorts. So yeah, not just the assault, it's really kind of broadened that scope and beyond just women as well, that we've seen it really have some broad reach there, including same-sex harassment, those types of things. And so I do think it's something that employers really need to have a plan in place to be able to address these issues and make sure that they're getting ahead of it, but then also prepare for more complaints to come forward and making sure that they're responding to them effectively.
Right, and being proactive is a good thing, and just to show that no one is immune from having to do this type of training awareness campaign. You were just telling me recently who is now doing some recent harassment
training. I
was
just reading that both the U.S. Senate and House are going to be undergoing mandatory sexual harassment training, both for senators and reps and their staffs.
Fantastic.
So it's definitely got some attention there. The EEOC also just announced, I believe it was last week, that they're going to be publishing their final guidelines on sexual harassment.
Oh, good timing.
So yeah, it was kind of funny in their press release. They acknowledged the timing, said it didn't have anything to do with all of the current activity in this and sort of the awareness that's happening with Me Too campaign and all of the other cases and complaints and claims that are out there right now. I don't know whether I believe that.
I'm a little skeptical on that.
It is. They did have their proposed rules that were, I think, published earlier this spring. So we've been waiting for the final guidelines. So I think that will be helpful for employers, especially when we look at harassment is severely underreported. And as we've kind of seen in the media right now, the depth of that underreporting.
Right.
For very valid reasons.
Sure.
It's my boss. I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to lose opportunities, that fear. And there's so many reasons why it does go underreported. Yeah. We both do harassment training, and I think one of the things that always is interesting to me is that when we ask people, like, how likely would you be to say something if someone made you feel uncomfortable or said something that was offensive to you or did something? And, not many hands go up when we ask that question. And so we kind of explore, like, well, why would you not say anything? And, people have sort of the reasons that we just talked about. And ideally is we want to, even if it is your boss, you should have someone else in the organization that you have the confidence that will address it. And that's part of a reasonable reporting procedure under EEOC guidelines, is that you do have multiple people that you can make your complaints to. But yeah, we still don't see that happen. We still people see that sit on claims. And I think that we're going to see less of that. I think
you're right.
Yeah, I think with what's going on right now, I think we're going to have people that really feel more empowered to come forward with their issues, and hopefully companies will respond in the right way. But yeah, I mean, so when we look at the holidays and the current landscape, I think it is important.
Right. So I mean, and we will report back once the final rules, I would imagine, are let you know kind of how they're different from the proposed rules, and kind of provide you with a summary of that. So holidays are particularly challenging. I think one reason is because there's a lot more alcohol that's flowing. Right. So what are some tips that you can provide some of our viewers as far as kind of before things get out of hand, right? So that they're not calling, or after the holidays say, uh-oh. So what are some proactive tips?
I think one of the things is to probably make sure that employees know what your harassment policy is. So it might be a good time to actually republish your policy. And I know employers probably don't do that a whole lot right now, but again, considering the landscape and that people are going to be paying much more attention to these issues. And we've seen it come up in situations where things that maybe, comments that people would make maybe weren't as big of an issue previously, that people are expressing their discomfort with them. So I think republishing your harassment policy is a really good idea, and probably even just going through it and acknowledging, like, hey, our holiday party is coming up, and these are still people that we work with, and we're still responsible for our behavior, and taking them through that. But then also making sure, reminding them of the reporting procedure to say, we hope, that nothing is going to happen, and you're all professionals and those sorts of things. But if something happens, here's what we want you to do. Here's who you should be talking to, so that's clear to employees as well.
So people aren't lost if it does, if it does happen.
Right. Another thing, because you mentioned alcohol, some employers will not have like an open bar, because certainly an open bar, when people can just drink as much as they want, that certainly opens them up to, I think, some additional problems maybe they wouldn't otherwise have. So some companies will have it like a drink ticket, like you can have 2 drinks or something like that. We've had some companies that don't have alcohol. I'd say that's probably less common than trying to put in some standards in place. And this really isn't a harassment issue, but more of a safety issue. Is also making sure that employees have a safe ride home after the holidays.
Good point.
So a lot of companies will have arrangements with Uber, Lyft that they will pay, or taxi that they'll pay for that transportation for people, which I think is a really good idea as well. And then I think really also getting ahead of the issue, this is beyond the holidays as well, but making sure that you're doing company-wide harassment training. And a lot of the research is showing that a lot of the harassment training that's provided isn't effective. And so making sure that you're giving real life examples and really taking people through what would you do in these situations, how would you respond, really going through the legal side, and then also just practically the practical day-to-day side of things.
Because people think it's not going to happen here, but then it happens.
Or they think, well, it's no big, they would tell me, if I offended them, they would tell me. Or sometimes we get the, well, they never said anything before, they always laughed at my jokes. And there's, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, we don't want to take it too far the other way. Like I was reading in the New York Times about the Mike Pence rule. So after Vice President Pence, who will not be behind closed doors with a woman, will not have lunch with a woman, just for fear that there would be something improper, or it would give the impression of impropriety. And so we don't want to encourage that. We don't want to encourage people to not associate with women, people of the opposite sex. That's not going to help. We need mentors. We need people to kind of provide that role. So that's not the solution.
And I also think it exposes some potential discrimination issues if you're treating women, differently in that regard. And I think, it doesn't. avoiding them is not going to solve the harassment. The other thing that I think that misses is that harassment can be anyone towards anyone.
Yeah.
And so when you're like, well, I'll be alone with a man, but not a woman. Well, what's to say that man also won't sexually harass you? And we've seen some of those cases recently where it is same sex. So it really can be anyone to anyone. So I don't think that's a good solution. I think it's really of treating people with respect. And one of my favorite pieces that I was reading about was someone produced an article, and she called it the Rock Rule.
The Rock.
So referring to Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
This guy right here.
Right, so you may be familiar with him from the WWE or WWF when I was growing up.
That's right.
Or he is also the voice of Maui from Moana, which is why The Rock is quite popular in my household.
Oh, very cool.
Yes.
So what does The Rock have to do with it?
Yeah, so basically it was, the article was about saying treat all women like you would treat Dwayne The Rock Johnson. And what she was really referring to in her quote in here was simply offer them the same respect, admiration, and healthy dose of fear you'd offer anyone who could completely destroy you should you deserve it. And I don't think that just applies to women. I think that applies to anyone in the workplace. And I think where people do, and certainly women have been disproportionately impacted by this, but I don't think it is, and it's not an exclusive thing.
Right.
And so it does impact many people. And so I think if you apply this rule to anyone, right?
It's a good litmus test, so to speak. And we'll show this picture just again. So you don't want him to crush you.
No.
Right? So would it pass muster with The Rock?
Would you say that? Would you do that to The Rock?
Right.
So I thought it was a pretty good response there, and I really liked how she might have been kind of flippant, but I thought her how she broke it down of just treating everyone with that same respect and admiration, knowing that this could come out, right? This could be used against you regardless of who that person is, male, female, anyone to anyone. So I thought it was a pretty good way to approach it.
So a little good tip moving forward, right?
Yeah.
And actually, it's The Rock sanctioned. Apparently, he has tweeted that he's all for it.
Yeah, he thought that was pretty impressive. So, anyways, hopefully you've got some good tips and trends. Well, both tips and trends to keep you out of trouble. And of course, if something does come up, because we're dealing with people and people are not perfect, certainly you can always reach out to us. So we're going to file this one under harassment.
Harassment for sure, maybe in the holidays.
And the holidays, sounds good. We'll see you next time. Thanks.